Now there's an interesting thing. Walt, for years, was the voice of Mickey Mouse, you know. But Walt, you know, he died of lung cancer, and he smoked like a chimney. So what happened is, when they went back to work on the Mickey feature, by the time they went back to work on the Mickey feature, Walt could no longer do that falsetto. So Jim McDonald, who was head of the story department, the sound department, had to take over and do Walt's voice. Now, if you know, if you're that close to it, you know where Walt leaves off and McDonald begins. Walt had a little more lyrical quality. You can tell which is Walt, which is Jim, but the average public would not notice that.
That was Walt's natural voice. He could just talk like that. Walt could naturally talk like that, like Mickey. Yeah. There was no.
He had a falsetto. He could do that falsetto.
Wow.
Back in the old days, before he smoked too much.
Well, there was some like war. I remember seeing some war propaganda Disney shorts. I remember Donald fighting the Nazis. Don't support the.
Well, we won Academy Award for In the Fuhrer's Face, for instance. I tell you, it was a funny thing. My nephew, a number of years after the war, my nephew Mike, who's now grown and has 2 kids, but anyway, he came running to me one day. He said, Uncle Billy, says, can you draw Hitler? I said, Hitler? Where did you ever hear of Hitler? Well, he'd been watching Saturday afternoon cartoons, after-school cartoons, and here was all these cartoons that were made during the war. And Hitler, and he and his little buddies thought Hitler was a funny villain.
Oh, that nutty Hitler. That wacky,
but
you
now,
know.
for instance, we made, see, that Tversky had written a book about victory through air power, you know, and they still hadn't, the idea still hadn't been sold to the Army or the government. And Walt felt it was a worthwhile project, so we did a very wonderful film on victory through air power. And of course, Walt's release was RKO. And RKO said, well, this is, you know, it's not commercial. They didn't want to handle it. So United Artists released that film. That was one of the, he didn't, United Artists had been on a release of his before, but at that time his release was RKO. But, and it's still, it's considered one of the best films of its kind. Yes?
I remember as a child seeing a very dramatic film of the dinosaurs dying off, and I was real small when I saw it. It seems to me it was with the Disney film, but it was the dinosaurs were dying off, and it was very.
That was in Fantasia.
Was that Fantasia? What music was being played?
The Sacre de Printemps, The Rite of Spring. Okay. Now that was a Stravinsky, a Russian composer, and it was written originally as a ballet, a primitive ballet for Russia. But the Disney studio conceived of it as the beginning of the world. And so they brought Stravinsky over, and Stravinsky didn't want to let them have it. He refused, and they said, well, look, they had no reciprocal trade agreement with Russia. Said, look, we're going to do it anyway, so you might as well take the money. So Stravinsky said, well, you know, okay, so he took the money, and the press release to the press was, this is what he had in his mind, back of his mind all the time, was the beginning of the world, you know, when you're doing this ballet, and this is exactly what he had in mind, till he got back to Russia. Then he just blasted the hell out of us, how much he hated that film.
It was beautiful. It did a great justice.
But Stravinsky didn't like it.
Well,
it's like, you know, you take Fritz the Cat, for instance. You know, Fritz, when Ralph Bashke decided to do a feature, he decided that he would get a, you know, the best way to start it, get something that already has a built-in reception that have some people have knowledge of. That's the best way to start. So he decided to animate Fritz the Cat. So he went to R. Kroom, you know, who created Fritz the Cat, great underground comics artist, and Kroom didn't want him to have it, and turned him down. But Kroom's wife says, "Don't be an idiot. We need the money." So Kroom said, "Okay, you sign the contract," and he wouldn't sign the contract. His wife signed the contract. Bashke.
So Kroom didn't help at all with the story?
Huh?
Or anything? Kroom didn't help at all with the development of the film?
Not a thing.
Wow.
And so what happened was that when they first started doing this thing, their release was going to be Warner's, but it was different than any animated feature had ever been. There was, you know, a totally different approach. So they thought they'd better let Warner's get a view of what they were getting into. So they had that sequence where Frisk jumps that crow out in the parking lot, out in the junk lot. And they took that on short to Warner's, and Warner backed off. This is not for us. So they got a guy named Ralph Kranz to produce it. So, but Baskey really wanted Kroom to like this film, see. So when they were about halfway through, he figured he had enough to show Kroom, so he invited Kroom to come over and take a look at what they'd done. And he knew that when Kroom saw what was going on, that he would be really thrilled. So Kroom brought some buddies of his, and they came over there, and they ran this film. And they stayed 13 minutes, got up and walked out. Broke Baskey's heart. Now, but there are a lot of purists, you know, people who love underground comics who do not like that film. They do not feel it was true to Kroom, and they think it's a very bad film.
Well, I just recently saw it, and I could see that. It's a
See, I
different-
loved Fritz the Cat because it was done by all my friends of mine. It was like having a visit with all of them. And that's what I love about that film. Of course, it didn't deserve an X, you know, R at most. But Baskey wanted, and he wanted to have the first X-rated feature cartoon, so they gave it an X.
Well, have you seen Ralph's film Fire and Ice?
What?
Fire and Ice?
No, I haven't seen that. I don't know where his films are shown. I don't know how he's making any money on these films. You know,
Video market.
Huh?
Video market.
I guess so. So they, you know, he made Fritz the Cat, and you know, and made some money on that. Then he did Heavy Traffic. But then he made Coonskin, which nobody, you know, it offended everybody and very few people have shown it, even though it's considered a very good film. And of course, then he did Wizards, and then he got the rights to the Lord of the Rings, and was supposed to do it in 2 parts. You know, did the first part, and it was so bad they never did the second part. That thing is, and of course what he did, he went over to Spain and shot the whole thing in live action, and then traced off the characters. And he had ads in the paper to come to work for him. He didn't need any experience at all. And but the thing is an abomination. And so they never made the second half. And I don't know what he's been doing except, you know, the new adventures of Mighty Mouse.
So you're not a big fan of rotoscoping?
Huh?
You're not a fan of rotoscoping?
I'm not a fan of rotoscoping. I mean, if it works, it works. But you know, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At Disney, we found out back in the golden age of animation. You see, well, I don't get the modern artists that they can't do anything unless they got something in copy or trace. So we didn't have that option back when I was coming up. But we found out that when you rotoscoped, they put an outline around the character. It lost weight. And so what they did at Disney's, instead of rotoscoping, we would they would shoot live action, but the animator would only use it as a departure. He would look at the live action on the moviola and pick out key poses, and that's the way, and animate in and out of those poses.
So he would look at the still and then draw something original by looking at a still, or kind of.
Yes, that's right.
Wow, that's incredible.
Well, I think,
You know, I mean, I've seen when Cliff Norberg, for instance, was animating the jitterbugs and all the cats joined in. His rotoscope, the moviola was here, and Cliff was here with his animation board, and he'd run off some frames until he found a key pose that he could use, and he'd make a sketch from. And so you see, animation is a drawing about something rather than of something, and good animation is about something rather than of something. And when you start getting into rotoscope, then you're doing something literal.
well, I think we're gonna have to wrap up. I appreciate you all coming out, and we're gonna be taping another show at 7 o'clock for cable access, so I invite you all to come out and ask questions, because we
Yeah, get your questions together.
need a good audience. So if y'all like to, it's gonna be downstairs in the, have you seen where they've been taping the shows? It's right down at the bottom of the stairs in the main lobby out there, where right to the entrance of the dealer's room. If you're facing the dealer's room, it's to the far left in the back. So I welcome you all to come out and ask some questions. We could use the audience. Thank you.